All right, we are live on video. We are live on, or good on audio. And let me go ahead and introduce you two. And once again, thank you guys so much for coming through. I was like really excited about this today's recording.
We too are excited.
I love talking about myself.
Yeah, same.
Then we can be definitely good friends, Brad, because I too love a good botter talk. All right, here we go. All right, with all the acknowledgments out the way, let's set the table for our esteemed guest today. They've been called, quote, the best couple in comics by Eisner-winning writer Tom King, who happens to know a thing or two about comic couples. And since 2018, they've explored the various dynamics of comic book relationships throughout pop culture and publishing history, and they've picked the brains of some of the best comic creators in the industry. And I challenge you. This is a challenge from me to all of you listeners. I challenge you to find a better intro song on any podcast. I've tried. You're wasting your time. Don't even take me up on that challenge. Short Box Nation, let's give it up for Brad and Lisa Gullickson. Hey, Brad. Hey, Lisa. How are y'all doing today?
Hello.
Thank you so much for having us, Jinx.
I love that quote from Tom King, and I am now going to reveal the truth behind that quote.
What?
It's AI generated.
Yeah. Well, it's not AI generated. FAIR. We had Tom on the show once before. We went to meet him at San Diego Comic-Con, and then we ran into him at New York Comic-Con. And by ran in, we stood in line to get our book signed. And we had our copy of Human Target with us. And we handed over our copy of Human Target, and he wrote, "To the best couple in comics, Tom King."
And we're like, yeah, we're adding that to our Twitter bio.
And I was like, that's press. You know what you just signed to that? That's press.
It's even more legit. If only we had a notary as well. It would be notarized, but
That is fair game. And that I would have taken it. He wouldn't even have to write my hell. If I would have grabbed your book, I would have used the same quote on mine. The best couple in comics spotted. There's only one of you. I know. But Tom King said it. That's awesome.
He did. We have it in writing.
You two are based out of Virginia, and I'm curious, what's the comic book scene or comic community like up there? Do you guys have a favorite shop that you go to?
Oh, we have lots of great shops up in our neck of the woods. We've been shopping at Big Planet Comics for the entirety of our marriage. I've worked at Big Planet Comics for comics, never for cash.
for store credit.
For store credit, I've worked at Big Planet Comics. They're the best. But you know, we also hang out at Four Color Fantasies whenever we're in Winchester, Virginia. We have recently partnered with Four Color Fantasies to host a series of comic book movies at the Alamo Drafthouse in Winchester, Virginia. And we're super excited about that. They're a great shop. They're an Eisner nominated shop. But like, I would say the community is really strong. And there's probably within driving distance a half dozen comic book shops.
We're really spoiled where we are.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And I've never heard of Eisner winning comic shop.
Nominated. They didn't win.
They're winners in our hearts.
Yeah, they're winners in our hearts. Yeah.
I am so glad I'm getting to experience the Gullickson effect, because when I listen to your podcast, I'm like, they have to have a good script. They have to practice like the banter between them and just landing your jokes on at the same time. But no, it's not the case at all. Like, I'm witnessing this firsthand. You guys are just naturally charming and funny.
Oh, that's very kind. We do have a script, but it's terrible.
Yeah. We do a script and we take a lot of notes. Mm-hmm. Lisa takes a lot of notes. And that's probably why we can never get our episodes out on a scheduled day.
You're making it sound like my fault.
No. I'm not. The notes, we both do a lot
bail,
of
Brad,
notes.
bail.
It takes a lot of research.
Yeah, it takes a lot of research. And that's why we're always late, Lisa.
Yeah.
Got it. Well, Lisa, it sounds like me and you are the same in that way, because when I send my outline to the rest of my crew, they're like, Butter, it's a hour-long show. It would take me 5 hours to go through just the first segment notes you got. You know, I'm like, guys, you want to do it or not? We're doing it right or not?
When you sent me the questions, I was just like, okay, me and Botter are going to get along. I like to prepare my thoughts. I do not like to think on my feet.
Yeah, I'm the exact opposite.
Yeah.
Like when we do interviews, Lisa will have read every interview the creator has done, listened to every creator podcast, and write 6-7 pages of questions. And I will do no research. I'll think of one question, and then I'm off to the races.
Yeah. And I think that we actually complement each other in that way.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I hope so.
All right, Brad. Let's put the let's put the spotlight on you for a sec, because I read your bio and I understand that Marvel's RoboCop 2 adaptation from the '90s, which, by the way, I didn't know ran for 27 issues. I thought it'd be like one of those 5-issue miniseries, but lo and behold, to my surprise. So I understand that was your first comic, and that's what got you into the medium. What memories come to mind when you think of that first comic? And then, Lisa, I want to know after that, what's your earliest comic memory?
I mean, when I'm thinking about the RoboCop 2 adaptation, I have very warm, nostalgic feelings for walking into Joe Gumbinger's comic book shop in Burke, Virginia. Rest in peace to both the shop and to Joe. And I can see that shop in my mind's eye right now. I can smell that shop. It was split down the middle. You had comics on one side and a used bookstore on the other side. And actually there was like a couple counters for cards, trading cards, baseball cards, that kind of thing. Like I have nothing but fondness for that shop. It was also a shop that was not very kid friendly. So I was 10 years old when I walked in there, and they were never overtly friendly. They became friendly, but it took years of going there before I ever really felt comfortable going there. That was very much like a 90s comic book shop. But I was thinking about this the other day. It's actually not the first experience with comics I had. It was the first experience I had with comic books. Mm-hmm. But before that, when I was real young, the first comic book character I ever encountered was Batman. And it was through those like children books that came with a cassette tape. And so it was like partial children's book, partial comic, partial audio experience. And I remember just reading and listening along to that book when I was like 4 years old, 5 years old, over and over and over again. And we recently uncovered a photo of me with that book as a little child. So I guess technically that was my first experience with comics.
That is like a blast from the past. Do you remember those, like the packages and you would have the audio tape on the bottom and then with the book?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I would love to get that book back. Like, you know, I've gone on eBay to look at it. I found it. It's not super expensive, but it's also not super cheap either. But then I'd also have to buy some sort of cassette player because I don't have one of those anymore.
I think your record player actually has a cassette player in the front.
Oh, yeah.
There you go.
It's it was a full multimedia experience. It was so ahead of its time.
Yes.
Yeah, and everything made out of paper and tape. Like, just really no digital elements at all.
No.
Yeah. Lisa, what about you? What's your earliest comic memory?
I didn't grow up reading comic books. I didn't start reading comic books until I was in college because there was a cute boy who read comic books, and I was like, oh, I can do that too and be cool.
It's true.
We're no longer together, me
Thank
and that
goodness.
person. But he did turn me on to comic books, and that was good. Growing up, we read comic strips. So the ritual every morning is that everybody takes turn with the funnies, and we would point to the funnies and laugh over them, and Peanuts and Kathy, and at night.
Real quick, did you have siblings?
Yes, I have 3 siblings.
Okay.
Gross.
Yeah. I'm the third of 4. And every night, my mom would read to us, and we would get one Bible story and one book of our choice. And many nights, it was Calvin and Hobbes, the Calvin and Hobbes books. And we've owned them in the long form. We own the big brick. Like, Calvin is probably where I get my sense of humor and my vocabulary and my darkness. Like, all of that comes from Calvin and Hobbes.
Existentialism, imagination,
and your dad still breaks out the newspaper when we come over, and he saves the funnies for us to look at.
Yeah, it's his love language. And
That's
my
sweet.
grandfather would do that too. My grandfather passed away in 2020, but like up until the end, he was 101. And up until the end, he would cut out comics, put them in an envelope, and mail them to my dad. Like, that is how,
awesome.
that was just one of the ways that they communicated, and they're both. They're from the Midwest, so any kind of communication is good.
Even if it's through snail mail. I like it.
That's right.
Well, that's awesome. So it sounds like even though, you didn't dive into the world of, quote unquote, like comic books, or comic books in the sense that a lot of people think of, which is maybe like the superhero stuff, 22-page comic books. It sounds like comic books has been a part of your life for a long time.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then the first comic book series that I read in college was Sandman. So it's not like I started with like the conventional, like where a beginner would start with comics. I was just like, hey, where's the deep end? I'm going in there. And I was confused. And I we're now doing like an issue by issue.
Yeah, I saw that.
Talk through Sandman on our Patreon, and I'm really getting way more from it the second time around.
Yeah, I mean, you know what? But here's the thing: it's like how much of a deep dive, or how deep is the difference between like Calvin and Hobbes and then jumping the Sandman, right? It's like, I mean, there's a lot of differences between the two, but when you look at like just how existential Calvin and Hobbes can be and depressing sometimes, you're like, you know what? Sandman's actually more of a fun and feel good read at times.
Yeah. Well, I feel like one of the things I struggled with when I started reading comics was just like panel layout. And I feel like starting with strips, like it creates this expectation that every 3 squares or something, there should be something you can pull from it. And then going from that directly into Sandman, where like the panel layout is not straightforward intentionally, it really was a challenge. And it really took like a concerted effort to teach myself as an adult to read comic books.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. I mean, Sandman's one of those reads where it's like sometimes it's like left to right, and then other times right to left, and sometimes you got to read it backwards and upside down, and hold your breath sometimes.
Yeah. And even just teaching myself to actually look at the pictures. Like I would finish a comic book and I go like, I didn't understand any of that, and then I realized, oh, I just read the words. I forgot to look at all of the pictures. I have to go back, look at it all again.
All right, on the topic of early beginnings and the start of things, if you don't mind regaling me and our listeners, how did you two meet, and what sparked the idea for the podcast?
We actually met 17 years ago today.
Oh, wow. Get the
I
hell out of here.
started working for Barnes & Noble at Reston, Virginia in 2006, and I met Lisa on my first day of work, which was 17 years ago this very day, the 5th of February.
Yeah.
Listeners, I told you that this episode would coincide with Valentine's, and I was having a hard time figuring out an episode to correspond with it. Brad and Lisa came through. I didn't even know. This was a welcome surprise. That's awesome.
Yeah, so I was hired as a bargain lead at the Reston Barnes & Noble, and Lisa was a part-time bookseller. And over the course of that year, we got to know each other a little bit more and more. And by 2007, we were dating. And by 2009, we were married. And we've been married ever since then. And,
that is awesome.
That's, that's it,
yeah,
right?
that's how we met.
That's all the details?
Yeah.
I like how Brad was like, Lisa, right? That's like fact checking, right? It's like,
Well,
all right, now tell the
Lisa-
real story.
We're leaving out all the saucy stuff.
Yeah. Because I left for Los Angeles in 2007. I was going to go become a Hollywood writer. And I went with a buddy across country. And by the time we got to Vegas, we were no longer friends.
Oh, wow.
And because Lisa and I's relationship had barely started, we had only been dating, but I was so excited about that relationship. And while we were on the road, I was calling Lisa like every night. And I was in Vegas, and I was like, well, do I continue on to LA or do I just go back? I'm going to go back. And so I drove back to Virginia, doing the top half of the country. So I did a whole circle of the United States. I hit as many states as I possibly could, and then right back where I started, and had to call up my Barnes & Noble manager. And I said, I know I just quit, but could I be music manager again? He's like, how about you be merchandise manager? And I was like, yes.
And you're like, oh, by the way, I'm dating Lisa.
Yeah, and is that cool?
And they're like, not really. Don't
like,
tell me that again.
Yeah, don't talk about it.
Minus the murder mystery and like C-list, Z-list superheroes. That really does sound like a Tom King comic book script right there.
Yeah,
awesome.
I would love Tom King to write our romance. Oh man,
That is really
somebody
sweet.
would die though.
I don't know. Somebody would have to
It was
go.
probably the friend in Vegas.
Oh yeah.
Oh my God! Yeah, Tom King. If you're listening, I mean, look, once human. Oh, he's writing. What is it? Street Kings now.
Oh no, Danger Street.
Danger Street. Thank
Danger
you so
Street
much.
plus like Gotham Year One plus some secret project. I mean, he's got like 9 projects that he's working on at all times.
Look, I think he would make an exception for an official CBCC adaptation right there.
Besides, he's just a writer. Writers have all the time in the world. It's not like an artist with multiple books.
Oh man! All right, so where did the idea for the podcast come from? What sparked that idea?
Well, we had a podcast before Comic Book Couples Counseling, In the Mouth of Dorkness, that we did with our buddy Darren and Brian, and that was a movie podcast. It was like let's talk about the latest film that came out this week. Let's review it. Let's talk about other things that we're watching. It was modeled a lot after the Slash film cast, or what's now called the film cast, with David Chen and Jeff Kanata and Devindra Hardawar. Shout out to those guys. I love
For no
their
reason.
podcast.
They're doing great.
They're doing great. Their Patreon numbers are like insane. They have like a real job with their podcast through their Patreon. It's very
Goals.
inspirational. So we were doing that kind of thing, and we loved it. But we also loved it to the point where we wanted to do our own podcast where we didn't have to ask others.
Scheduling 4 people
Oh no, it's a nightmare.
to do a show is really hard.
Very difficult. Yeah. And anytime you had like a different idea to try out, you'd have to talk it through. And, so we just wanted to do our own podcast, basically. And Lisa came up with the idea for Comic Book Couples Counseling.
We knew we wanted to do something comic book related because that was an interest that we shared and loved and didn't really have another outlet to express at the time.
Yeah.
And then I also have always been super into advice columns, self-help books, and I was listening to a podcast called By the Book, where what they do is they take a self-help book and then they live by it for 2 weeks and then they review like what that was like, which is a show that I was very into at the time. I no longer listen to, and I don't say that because it's not quality, but just that I can no longer vouch for it. But I was like, what if we did something that involved those 2 things, like the area of self-help and comic books?
And I can't remember if I said Comic Book Couples Counseling. Or
No,
if
that was
you...
totally my idea.
Okay. All right,
I came up with Comic Book Couples
So
Counseling.
the title was Lisa's, I believe you. And when I guess when we just heard that title, we were like, ooh, Comic Book Couples Counseling. I just like saying that. And when you see it in a tweet or if you see it on like a Facebook
it makes
post,
a person curious.
it just, there's nothing quite like it just through those 4 words. And I was like, ooh, that's something.
Yeah.
So
it's a very solid name. And once I got past like a month of just stuttering and flubbering over it, always I would be like comic book couples,
Yeah.
it's a name that sticks once you get it. And I love the abbreviation too. CBCC is what I've been calling you guys on the low.
like
but
it.
Yeah. And we wanted to cover Don Greenwood and Norrin Rad as experienced in the Silver Surfer run by Dan Slott and Michael Allred.
Classic.
But we didn't want them to be our first couple
because they're like that's like one of my all-time favorite, not just comic books, but like things on this planet. I love that run so much.
And you didn't want to mess it up.
Yeah.
So you're like, well, what couple could we use as a starter couple to to try this concept out on, but also not be embarrassed if we don't do it perfectly. And I was like, well, my first comic book couple that I ever fell in love with was Scott Summers and Jean Grey. Let's do a whole series of episodes on them.
So we paired them with the book, The 5 Love Languages.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much defined our entire run.
Yeah. And so since then we've done all kinds of couples. And we eventually did get to Don Greenwood and Norrin Rad.
Episode 50.
Not until episode 50. Yeah.
And we did the
you guys
Enneagram in Love.
You guys are such a well-oiled machine. I'm looking at I'm going to be looking at my co-host like, guys, we got to get married to take our game to the next level. All right, our chemistry is here. We got to get married.
There are advantages.
Yeah. I think just taking a little time to just hold each other's hands and look deeply into each other's eyes, I think, is a good move.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like figuring out everyone's love language, too.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, the Gary Chapman book is problematic in a lot of ways.
Big time.
We don't endorse everything about that book. But the vocabulary that book gave us to talk about our podcast.
And our needs.
And our needs.
Yeah.
I really cherish that.
Yeah.
So
awesome.
What we do with a lot of these self-help books that are troubling, we just go like, well, we're just going to dissect this thing.
We'll act like we're at the cafeteria. We'll take what we want. We leave the stuff that is alarming.
Yeah.
So Ed, Cesar, and Ashley, if any of you guys are listening right now, when I ask you to take the your love language test next week before we record, this is why.
Yeah, and report back. We're curious. We want to know. We want to know your business. That's the truth.
So I think what makes your show so unique for me, personally speaking, I'm sure a lot of your listeners can, this resonates with them. What makes it so unique from other comic podcasts is the commitment to your namesake. I do remember the first time I came across your show and, I saw, the phrase love language combined with Cyclops and Jean Grey. And I was like, wow, that is an interesting pairing, but one that really piques my interest and makes a lot of sense. I think you both do such a good job of analyzing relationships in comics and offering really insightful perspectives, based on your own observations, but your own personal, things that you guys are going through as a couple, as a married couple at that, and offering that insightful perspective on the medium's approach to not only romance, love, but you guys also study friendships and family within comics. The latter of that being very evident in your latest series of episodes where you guys explored TMNT Last Ronin. And aside from giving a really good review of the comic itself, you guys also consulted the writings of a doctor who had written a book called, quote, The Sibling Survival Guide, Surefire Ways to Solve Conflicts, Reduce Rivalry, and Have More Fun with Your Brothers and Sisters, which I think one is a great book for, the turtles. And then one I kind of wish I would have had growing up. Maybe it might have reduced some of the rivalries with my own brothers. But yeah, just so, and you guys offered that just so you could really drive home the themes of the familial dynamics in the book, which is, I think, something that, as comic fans, maybe we don't really pay attention to when it comes to the Turtles, where it's it's a cool comic, right? It's 4 Ninja Turtles fighting other ninjas, right? It's just you stop right there, period, right? Just a great book. But your approach to how you guys study and critique and dissect other comic books, I think it sets you guys worlds apart from other shows that I've come across in this industry. And I want to know, how do you guys go about picking the couples and then pairing it with a specific relationship or self-help book? What's the thought process behind some of those pairings?
When we started, we actually put a list together of all the couples we wanted to cover and all the couples we wanted to save. So Don and Norrin were the first couple we wanted to save. We wanted to save Reed Richards and Sue Storm for a good long period until we did ultimately cover them. And we wanted to save Lois and Clark, which we're
still holding on to.
We
have not covered them yet.
But as we progressed through the podcast, we kind of got to a point where we really didn't know who we are going to cover until we're wrapping up the couple we're currently covering. We have some ideas. We have some couples that we want to
We have couples that we announce and then take back on the next episode.
Right.
I've done that too.
So for example, after the Ninja Turtles, we had so much fun discussing the Cyber Samurai Ninja Turtles as seen in the Archie comics that we were like, well, we haven't done Archie, Betty, and Veronica. Let's do a 3-way. We haven't done a menage a trois.
Yeah, we haven't done polyamorous relationships, open relationships.
Let's do Archie. And then, this magical thing happened where we got an opportunity to chat with Robert Kirkman.
For 15 minutes.
Ooh, that is 14 seconds, 59 more minutes than I've ever been able to talk to him.
And when they said, would you like to talk to Robert Kirkman for 15 minutes?
We're like, what can we accomplish in 15 minutes?
So he said, what we should do is we should have Robert Kirkman program our coverage of Adam and of Mark and Eve for Invincible.
wow.
So let's now actually cover Invincible. So our next couple is going to be Eve and Mark, and Robert Kirkman helps us program it, because the challenge with Eve and Mark is that series is huge, and we only want to do 4 episodes on them.
And we want issues where it really is Mark and Eve, which are actually rarer than you'd think they are.
Yeah, so when you throw that question to Robert Kirkman, you say, like, do the job for us, he comes up with an answer. That answer is not what we were expecting.
Yeah.
And now I'm like even more excited to cover Invincible on Comic Book Couples Counseling.
But we still haven't chosen the book, the self-help book yet.
We're still working on that.
And the way I program that is I go on Amazon and I just search different self-help books using different combinations of words. And then as I go through them, I find an interesting title and I screen grab it. So I have archived in my phone literally tens of, perhaps hundreds of covers of self-help books, and then I just kind of do a mix and match until I find something that really jives.
The initial idea on the self-help book was we're going to start with the classics or the bestsellers. So that's why we started with the 5 love languages. You know, as retail employees,
men are from Mars, women are from Venus.
We know what books are really popular. And so when we went to Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus for Saga, for Marco and Alana, we discovered like that book,
also problematic.
Not just problematic, straight up trash.
Bad, not a good book.
Toxic, bad book. And then we were like, well, do we want to like platform all of these heinous bestsellers?
Yeah.
Or do we want to find some books that actually might offer something unique to say and positive to say? So we do a little bit more research on that. That's not to say that we still don't find super troubling self-help books.
It's hard. I mean, especially with how we're becoming enlightened over time about, you know, the gender spectrum and the sexuality spectrum, and how can we find a book that is actually inclusive? And I think that that's like an ongoing conversation about these self-help books. Like, can we find a book or even, you know, a handful of books that really do apply and include everyone? And I think this is an area for growth when it comes to publishing.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you brought up your own journey, you know, when it comes to our journey and like also opportunities to like grow and learn when you're picking these books. Because I was going to ask, did any like couple in particular, or maybe book, self-help book, have like a significant impact on your personal relationship with each other, even if it was as far as just making you maybe pause for a second and think, I guess that's applicable to us, or, you know, there's some similarities there?
I really love the Enneagram, and the Enneagram is like one of those, like, I love putting myself in a category, you know, and I love putting other people in categories. The Enneagram is also not perfect, but it's like one of those where I can like go like, okay, I'm an Enneagram 4, I'm an individualist, I have these motivators for myself. Like I want to be seen as like my own person. I want to consider that, like, I want to be on a continuous growth journey. Brad is an Enneagram 7. He's an enthusiast. He loves to search for excitement. He doesn't like to be tied down with too much responsibility, like that kind of thing. Like, I really love the Enneagram. We talk a lot about the 4 tendencies also, and I'm very much a rebel tendency, and I do think about that a lot. You know, I'll be going about my day, and I'll react in some way, and I go like, is that just because I'm a rebel? Yeah.
Is that why I've responded in such a fashion? And what I find is like every episode helps me be a better person, or helps, at least, if not be a better person, helps me explore who I am. And I mostly take away ideas out of those conversations. So another one is, I think this is Brene Brown, but it might not be, but the idea of being a prisoner to the narrative that you are writing. Yeah, that's from Dr. John Gottman and from Brene Brown. Okay, thank you. Like, Brene Brown is the, like, what is the story that you're telling yourself? Like, when you find yourself in this really negative place, or you find yourself really scared or frightened, what is the story that you're telling yourself? Yeah. And I think about that fiction that I am writing about me and others all the time. It's easy to get in your head and go like, oh, that person was being a jerk because of X, Y, and Z. And then you realize that X and Z, you have no actual insight into. You've just imagined X and Z. So, like, slow your roll.
Yeah, and sometimes, like, the wisdom that we take is not from the self-help book, but from the comic itself. And I feel like we had a breakthrough talking about The Last Ronin, even though that wasn't our favorite interpretation of the Ninja Turtles. Mikey being in this, like, toxic cycle of going, like, my life is not complete until I meet this expectation. My life is not complete until I have this vengeance. Like, as we were talking about it, like, I thought, like, what if he just decided that that's not true? What if he decided, I don't actually need to fulfill this role that my father set for me? Like, what if he just took that presumption that he's lived with and turned it on its head? Would he feel better? Would he feel different? Would he function differently?
The great thing about that last Ronin conversation was it helped us better understand what we want out of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and the fact that we paired it right after talking about the Archie era and the Cyber Samurai Ninja Turtles, which is a very different look at the future, but still a post-apocalyptic future, but a future where all the brothers are still around.
And they're like middle-aged and they all have their own lives and their own separate goals, and yet they're still like the Ninja Turtles. They still have this shared identity.
Yeah, and are also able to connect with other people. The fact that, like, Raphael found love and happiness with Mezcal
and has become an entrepreneur.
And so you read that and you go, like, yeah, that's what I want from Raphael. Raphael was a brooder, and he matured out of being that lone gunman. He matured into appreciating his family, and that allowed him to connect with Mezcal, have a relationship with her. But then you see Raphael in The Last Ronin. Spoilers for The Last Ronin. But Raphael dies in The Last Ronin because he's still a hothead as an old man. And I'm just like, that's not the death I want for Raphael. I want growth. I want hope for that Raphael's going to be more than what he was when we met him when he was 14 years old.
And when we talk about how we would love to redefine Raphael's journey, it helps us think about, how do we want to redefine our journey? Like, do we just want to fulfill the expectations of that we had when we were 10? What if these things that make me feel insecure or make me feel like I haven't, done anything with my life, make me feel like I haven't had any accomplishments? What if those expectations I had for myself are actually not true?
Yeah. That was a great conversation, that Ronin episode.
Yeah.
But also,
not
everyone loved it.
We hurt some feelings, and for that we apologize.
People have very intense feelings about these characters. And respect, because we have intense feelings about those characters, and The Last Ronin is such a popular story. We enjoyed the comic, but we took some serious issues from it as well, and I think some people didn't necessarily agree with us, and that's okay. That's what the conversation's for.
One thing that you cannot doubt, though, is that your passion for the medium is very prevalent in the way you guys talk about comics. And I'm sitting here like, wait a minute. They're on my Butter. You should probably chime in right here. I could just listen to you guys discuss comic books. So for days, because like I said, the passion is very apparent. And what I love about your approach to comic reviews is that you guys really do elevate the medium of reviews. You guys are like showing that you can learn, or I'm sorry. You guys are showing that you can take like really good life lessons from comic books. I mean, good and bad, right? Like you should be an adult and be able to decide what you want to apply to your life. But I do enjoy that you guys are looking well past the surface level and even like the level underneath that to these characters, and I think putting a spotlight on relationships in comic books is such a unique perspective. Because, as someone that's been reviewing comics for so long, I'm always looking at like story, and I try to focus a lot on art and character development. But I guess hearing you guys talk about, just the TMNT, like, I don't know, there's something very refreshing about hearing about like the group dynamic in their, characters, just like their love, their love language, like how they handle relationships, Yeah, I feel like, I've never really thought about like how love is interpreted in comic books and how that, impacts a character's development throughout the years. So yeah, and also I've never seen this Cyber Samurai TMNT, so I'm going to be looking that
so
up
fun.
after this.
Like it. People think of it as the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles for kids, but what makes them the themes that make them interesting are not kid themes. Like it's really about being middle-aged, going like, hey, I have to redefine who I am. I have to redefine how I interact with my siblings. Like
the Archie era is out of print. You can't get like physical copies, but you can get digital. And if you're like with Comixology Unlimited, you can get, it's part of your subscription.
Right.
I would highly recommend reading the Archie era because yes, they are quote unquote kids comics, but they are extremely strange. I mean, it's some of the strangest comics I've ever read. And if you're, they don't tell Ninja Turtle stories like they do in the Archie era. But it's also like the only Ninja Turtle era where the characters are allowed to grow beyond what we knew them in the Mirage Studios era. And, I always sell the Archie era on one issue in particular where a Raphael and a Donatello from the future go back in time, meet up with the contemporary Ninja Turtles, and then they go back in time to World War II and they confront Hitler. And they have a fight with Nazis, and Raphael from the future beats the hell out of Hitler.
Yeah, he gives him a real puncheroo right to the kisser.
It's
puncheroo, right?
You cannot believe it's like this is an Archie comic.
That's pretty wild.
Yeah, but like Raphael has his encounter with Hitler, then Leonardo has his encounter with Hitler, and it's very different.
Yeah.
And it's a different approach, which is then echoed in the climax of the whole arc. Like, so it's really, to me, I think it's way more of a spiritual extension of what happened in those first 7 Mirage comics, because those were not gritty. They were weird as well. Fugitoid
the Mirage Studios era is nuts.
Is nuts. And so like this like dark knightifying doesn't have to happen to all of the comics, or it can, but they might not be our favorite.
Yeah, but like to get back to your point, Botter, Lisa and I treat comics like we would treat any other art form. It's a medium, and it can contain as much depth and passion as anything you see in a movie, anything you see in a book, in a painting, in a video game. Like all of these delivery systems for narratives have value. And what we do with all our art is we go into it looking for ourselves, no matter what the comic is, and no matter what quality of comic that is either. Like that's why I like our show so much, is we can read some really trashy comics, and I'm not going to name names here, but if you go through our backlog, you'll see that we have discussed some really trashy comics. But even in those trashy comics, we have found insights that have helped our relationship and helped us better understand the interpretation of those characters, and how these stories can elevate us.
Yeah.
Well said.
Like when we were coming up with our format, we wanted to find some. Well, like I am an extremely insecure person, and I wanted to and it was hard for me for a long time to feel comfortable in the comics book space. I'm not one of those people who have like this amazing recall where I can name, that's in issue number 69 and this happens.
And like any community, there are a lot of gatekeepers around, right?
I was always afraid of the pop quiz. And if I fail the pop quiz, someone will assume that I'm like not a fan of comics.
Just rip up your comic book card. Just right there on the spot. I know what you mean.
Yeah, so I wanted to be able to talk about comics in a way where I felt my perspective felt valuable.
Yeah.
And and I've always been a person who loves to talk about themes and messaging and that kind of thing. So like what created our voice as a couple started as this insecurity that I had, but I really honestly think that it has become our strength, and it's helped my confidence to go I have something of value to offer to the comic book conversation besides look at all of the Spawn villains I can name, you know?
Cygor, Lisa.
Don't quiz me.
Well said. Yeah, you guys offer really unique perspective, and you both prove that no matter how trashy the comic book is, there's probably at least one gem to find if you look hard enough, and that's what I like about you two. You guys elevate the medium. You guys look at comic book reviews in just a completely different light, and it's really refreshing, right? To like think about comic books and relationships in comics, which I think gets kind of overlooked. So, which leads me to my next question. I'm talking to two pros, or at least the best pros I can think of when it comes to studying love in comic books and relationships. So I want to know from you two, what are some common or overlapping characteristics of great comic book couples? Like, what makes for a great comic book couple?
I think what makes for a great comic book couple is what makes for a great couple. Open communication, empathy, and and love.
Yeah.
Obviously, love.
A genuine curiosity and nerdiness for the You should be a fan of your partner. Like, I think that Brad is like the absolute coolest guy. I think what he says is clever and funny, and I respect his personal mission, and he respects my personal mission.
I'll never forget the date we were on where I either let slip or I cautiously informed Lisa that I had a toy collection. And when she responded like, "Oh yeah? Like what kind of toys?" And I was like, "Oh, that's nice." And then since that day that Lisa was like, "That's interesting that you collect toys," I was like, not only do I collect toys, but I'm going to collect toys so hard now. My addiction skyrocketed.
I can collect toys and still get laid? Like, whoa.
He's
Game
like,
changer.
You thought you couldn't walk through my house without stepping on a toy? Wait till a month from now.
Yeah.
Ooh, I'm going to get all those Marvel Legends.
So true. So true.
I think also something that you brought up earlier, and we use the Brene Brown quote, like, what is the story you're telling yourself? One of Dr. John Gottman's things is successful couples describe their narrative, like the story of their relationship, as like a triumph. So if you're a couple who goes like, oh, we've gone through our hardships and we've clung to each other and we've come out the other side and it was wonderful and we just keep, our love keeps growing stronger.
We're victorious.
Yeah. Like those couples succeed where couples go like, oh, we've been through our hardships and it's really worn us down. And we don't know what our relationship is going to be day to day, but we continue to work really hard and we'll just see what happens.
And that's most comic book couples.
And that's most comic book couples. So if we were to just name off the dome some successful comic book couples, like Don Greenwood and Norrin Rad.
Yeah,
my
absolutely.
OTP. I love them.
I would also say one of the most surprising, but certainly one of the most high-functioning couples we've ever covered is Wen and Carmen from The Second Life of Dr. Mirage from Valiant Comics. Those two, they cracked the code.
Yeah.
And there's very little conflict between them. They are working on the same mission. They have the same goals. They have a extremely horny sex life.
Yeah. Another thing for successful couples is where each couple has a really strong individual identity, but then they have a third identity that is one.
Yeah.
You know? So
Gwen and Carmen definitely fit that bill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, then let's look at the flip side. What are some iconically bad and toxic comic couples?
Well, let's see.
For me, Bruce Wayne and Selena Kyle are not. I wouldn't say they were necessarily toxic, but I would definitely say that they're non-functioning because they have it's okay for individuals to have different principles, but those principles cannot be mutually exclusive.
That's a couple. I hear what you're saying. I understand and appreciate what Lisa is saying about that couple, but it's also a couple that I deeply love as a couple trying to make it work. The problem with Selena and Bruce is when you're reading their stories, you can't help but also be reading editorials story about them. And because of the canon and the retcon that must always happen, whatever growth that occurs between Bruce and Selena is, reneged.
Yeah.
And it's so frustrating. Now, you can then have like an Elseworld situation where you can tell the rest of that story. And they have done that. And I would say they've done it in satisfying ways and not so satisfying ways. But I do love reading them as a couple.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
it's because they're hot and spicy. They're hot and spicy, but I don't think until one or both of them retires, it's not going to work.
It's not that they're hot and spicy. It's that they're deeply flawed. Like,
yeah.
I enjoy characters who are flawed, and the people writing those stories recognize their flaws and want to have a conversation about their flaws. And that's why I like Tom King's run on Batman so much, because he is excavating the internal life of those characters really, really well. But then, like, as you're reading that series, you could also feel like DC going like, well, no, let's not do that. Let's kill Alfred and let's keep him dead. Yeah. And that stuff kind of gets in the way.
I think also imbalanced power differentials. So I would say like Vision and Virginia is a toxic couple, just because he is her creator.
Another Tom King story.
Tom King story.
Tom King should be paying us for this episode.
Agreed. He should sponsor us. But they never figured out how, Vision always felt that he was the teacher of the family and that they should defer to him because he's the one who's lived the longest,
and
literally,
he
built them. So bad power differentials. If any situation where one partner is considered to be more deferential than the other, that's pretty toxic.
I think the Scott and Jean relationship is deeply upsetting as you read it, especially the way we covered it, starting with the Dark Phoenix saga, going to the X Factor issues, those early X Factor issues where Scott is with Madeline Pryor before we know what's going on with Madeline Pryor. But like the way Scott treats Jean in those issues is insane. And then the stuff he does to Madeline in those issues.
Oh yeah.
You're like, how can you ever like Cyclops again after reading the first 6 issues of X Factor?
Cyclops is a very black and white type character, and he always had unreasonable expectations for Jean Grey.
When you get later on and we get to the Grant Morrison's run in New X-Men and things get really weird and uncomfortable with the introduction of Emma into that dynamic, none of it is healthy, but readable as hell.
Oh yeah. Because of course,
into it.
Emma is very observant and she's very manipulative. So she saw those kind of little buds of resentment in Scott that she
so good.
She could get in there.
And in other words, Emma was player hating big time on our girl Jean Grey.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's no doubt that you guys don't do your homework. I mean, the fact that you guys survived or even decided to kick off your podcast journey with exploring the very troubling relationship, up and down relationship of Jean and Cyclops, and survived to tell about it too, and decided to continue doing more podcast episodes is commendable. I want to get your opinion on one of my favorite comic book couples right now in recent comic talk, and I definitely know they are, you can call them toxic. They definitely have their troubles, but I want to just hear your thoughts, right? I am currently loving, and you know what? On the topic of Tom King it's a Tom King title. I am currently loving Human Target by Tom King and Greg Smallwood. And the story primarily centers on Chance, the Human Target, falling in love with Ice from the Justice League International.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the best comics out there right now.
Yeah.
For sure. And I figured that you guys would know exactly. You guys are probably reading it just as much and loving it just as much as I am. Thoughts on them as a couple?
My feeling about them as a couple is like, I don't want to say too much because one, we are going to do an episode on them.
We have
Hell
to.
yeah.
The comic is so
excited.
good and is firing on all cylinders and is such a relationship book, and not just between those two, but there's so many relationships going on in the Human Target series that are all very complicated.
Yeah.
And I think where we are right now in the series, we can say that it is a troubling relationship, but I also don't feel necessarily comfortable saying that it is a toxic relationship yet, because the last few issues of any Tom King book kind of make you rethink everything that came before. And so I want to wait to see how this series ends before I dare judge that.
That's fair.
Yeah. But I think they're a prime example of you do sometimes you have to do some work on yourself first. And I think
they are hiding so much between each other.
Right.
Like what is an example of what's not a good thing to do?
Yeah.
If you're in a relationship and you're not being absolutely truthful with your partner, you need to investigate if this relationship is really for you.
Yeah. I mean, you don't have to tell everything to your partner. It's a relationship, not a deposition, right? But at the same time, can you, you should do the thing.
It's hard to say.
It's hard to say. The flow of information, if the lack of flow of information is hurting your relationship.
Is hurting your relationship or even hurting yourself.
The idea, you do have to question, well, why can't I share it?
Yeah.
What if my partner knew this, what is my expectation?
And to me, it's not even that that my partner is hiding or I'm hiding something from my partner. Like you said, you don't need to share everything you've ever done in your life with your partner. That's not a relationship either. But if the things that you are not telling your partner are still eating you up,
yes,
are a problem for you, you need to work out those things.
Yeah. And nobody should be in a relationship where they fear rejection constantly. If the reason you're hiding so much is because you fear the rejection of your partner, then you have some work to do on yourself. And maybe that's not the right partner for you.
Yeah, and also, we haven't said this yet, but I think people are aware, we're not experts either.
No.
Which is why we brought in love experts,
which
right?
Which is why we use the books.
Yeah. And so anytime we're talking like we are now, as if we know what we're talking about, we don't.
Yeah, we don't.
We're on this journey too. We're also stumbling and fumbling our way through our relationship and making mistakes every day and learning from them.
Yeah. We're only experts in being married to each other.
Yeah.
And it's because we've put in the hours.
Our listeners right now are like, I thought they were just going to talk about comic books and superheroes punching each other in the face. Wrong, listeners. Today you've got homework, right? And that's to look into the mirror, into yourself, right? Brad and Lisa, I imagine that you guys, you guys are a successful podcast. I can imagine you guys get a lot of compliments on the show. I think your production is really done really well. The reviews are really smart. But I got to know, do you ever get any fan mail or responses from people coming at you from just praising or maybe admitting to relationship problems or learning things about themselves, non-comic book compliments when it comes to the show? Do you guys have people hitting you up man, I didn't think about that, or hey, that book that you guys talked about really helped me out in my own personal relationship? Do you guys have any anecdotes like that?
The short answer is yes, definitely, but not as many as I would like.
Our love language is words of affirmation, so we do like to get compliments constantly.
We get lots of great reviews. We have plenty of compliments, but always want more compliments. But I do we have gotten occasionally people sharing how our conversations on certain episodes have helped them recontextualize their relationships, their own image of themselves.
Just changing the bar of how they want to be treated or how they want to treat their next partner.
And when we do get those compliments, I mean, it's humbling.
Those are the ones where like I feel truly like seen.
Yeah, and
Awesome.
and we deeply appreciate them, and therefore we want more of that.
But even
Awesome.
if people listen and they're just enjoying the comic book talk, and this is my insecureness talking, and they're just 15 seconds skipping through the entire couples counseling part. Like, more power to you. It's your show.
Yeah.
It's your show to
They're
listen
like-
to, so you can listen to it however
they're
you
like-
want.
They're like, I don't want to face the truth. 15, 15, 15. Go back to superheroes. Punching, punching, punching.
As
All
long
right,
as you're
speaking
giving
about-
us 5 stars on Apple iTunes,
That's
like
all
whatever.
that matters, right?
Live your
Yeah.
dream.
Give me a download. I don't care how you listen to it. If you're listening to us on like 20 times speed, whatever.
Yeah.
Speaking about words of affirmation, I shared that incredible Tom King quote at the top of the episode. But aside from him, in your 5+ years of hosting the podcast, you two have interviewed a murderer's row of comic book greats like Mark Waid. Kelly Thompson was on the show. You guys had Alex Ross on the show, who I didn't know even did interviews. I thought Alex Ross was like Bill Watterson, who just like disappeared and does this, is a hermit. But you guys also had Kevin Eastman, the Talk TMNT Last Ronin, on the show, and that's just naming a few. You guys have had a lot of Creator Corner interviews, and then I was curious to know what interviews or conversations with creators stick out or resonated with you the most. And
There's so
have you
many.
ever answer that question first, and I'll throw in the next one.
Well, I mean, the truth is, any creator who comes on our show, we love you.
Yes.
I mean, it means everything to us that you would devote any time to chatting with us, because we have such an infatuation for people who put comics out in the world. Like, it is the greatest gift that you could give humanity are comic books, as far as we're concerned. So anybody who comes on and wants to talk about their craft or talk about their characters or talk about the relationships of their characters, we're super thankful for. That being said, I have a special place in my heart for the first creators who came onto our show before we really had any download numbers or we had proven ourselves in any way. So, Tom Scioli came on early to talk
Awesome.
about Fantastic Four and his Jack Kirby biography. And when he did that, that gave us an interview that we could then give to other creators see, this is what we've done. We did an episode like this. And we got Stephen Bissett on our show to talk about the saga Swamp
That
Thing.
was really, really special.
And that was like a pinch me moment, dream come true to chat
Ultimate
Swamp Thing
fanboy
and
moment.
Abby with Stephen Bissett, one of the greats.
Yeah.
And when those two interviews happened, suddenly people like Kevin Eastman were willing to accept an email from us. And when Scott Snyder came on the show to talk about his latest batch of Comixology originals, that changed the game for comic book couples counseling.
First and foremost, he was game to talk about the greater themes and talk about
There we go.
his thoughts on God and creation and everything. He was just so willing to go there with us.
And in the comic creator world, there are so many lovely and friendly people. We've made friends with these folks, and it's just a beautiful community. I think the comic book community also gets a lot of bad rap because of these little gnats on the fringes, this vocal minority, this angry vocal minority. But the truth is, the comic book community is the most loving community we've ever been a part
Just a
of,
bunch of sweeties.
fans and creators alike.
Yeah.
So, to recognize Scott Snyder as being such a sweetie, being game, being willing, and then when we've met him up at cons,
He's been really, really nice.
he did a short video. Him and Greg Capullo did a short little video at San Diego Comic-Con last year saying, watch Comic Book Couples Counseling, even though there's nothing to watch. It's a
an
podcast.
audio podcast. We didn't correct him.
But he did a little video. The two of them said, watch Comic Book Couples Counseling.
Yeah.
And that was the greatest gift any creator has ever given us.
It was very sweet.
And
Love
I
a good
watched
shout
that
out.
8-second clip and I get emotional looking at it.
Yeah.
And he's come back on, and we've had conversations now with Jeff Smith and
Daniel Warren Johnson.
Tom
He's another
King,
one who
Daniel
really
Warren Johnson.
delivers.
All of these guys are, to use Lisa's word, are sweeties.
Yeah.
And it's
Really generous. Generous
Really
with their
generous.
thoughts. Generous with their worldview.
and for the most part, everyone who's come on Comic Book Couples Counseling has been ready and willing to have these conversations. And sometimes they're surprised. They're
Yeah.
like, oh, I didn't know we were going to go here.
Yeah.
But here we
We're
are.
not talking about superheroes punching
Yeah,
superheroes.
exactly.
You guys want to know about my love language?
Yes,
Beautiful.
Yes. So,
Well,
that's the
what-
answer. Is that an answer?
Yeah.
No, that's a solid answer. So, what writer, artist, or creative team do you think embodies the ethos of comic book couple counseling the best through their work? Like, is there any writer or artist that you feel like really puts thought into like expanding and giving a solid relationship and exploring love within comic books and the characters?
I think definitely Daniel Warren Johnson is all about
Yeah.
the relationships, is all about,
Yes.
confronting your inner demons, confronting, asserting your power. Like his last Do a Power Bomb, I think, is a masterpiece. His Beta Ray Bill run was so gorgeous.
Murder Falcon. So many tears.
He's writing the conversations that I want to have.
Yeah. That's a great pick.
Yeah, a solid one.
Like, I was thinking also just from like a couple dynamic. Again, going back to Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo, those guys have a really interesting relationship that when it started, when they first did New 52 Batman together, Scott Snyder had like a specific way of wanting to write scripts and tell stories, and that didn't align with Greg Capullo. And Greg Capullo was like, look, if, I'm not going to just draw your script, Scott. And Scott had to take that criticism, that idea, and go, okay, well now, how will I reshape the way I tell stories to collaborate better with Greg Capullo? And then they found a rhythm through their relationship and became one of the best writer-artist duos around.
Yeah, that's a great example of like a couple has to have that third identity where they become
Well
one
said.
voice. Jeff Lemire and Andrea Sorrentino are like that as well, where when they come together, they are this third thing.
And one of the most adorable comic book creator couples has to be, again, Greg Capullo, but this time with Todd McFarlane.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
They have such a long-lasting relationship. They finish each other's sentences. We had them on the show to talk about their Batman Spawn collaboration recently, and it was just so funny to just sit back and let them loose. And they clearly love each other, and they have a shorthand for everything.
Yeah. They're
Man.
cute.
Well said. Very good answer on the Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo. I remember reading a couple of those early interviews when they were launching Batman New 52, and it was getting such critical acclaim, and they were talking about their relationship and how it was kind of like a give. And hearing you kind of echo that reminds me that like at the heart of every great comic book couple is a great working relationship, right? Like that keyword being relationship there, and the different gives and takes, and learning one another that you've got to do to produce like really great art. So a really good job of answering that one. This one's more so for Lisa, because Lisa, I appreciate your honesty. I love that you brought up your shortcomings, your own anxiety when it comes to like being in this space of comic books. And I was curious, and I was curious, how has your perspective on comics changed since doing the show? Like, do you view the art form in a different light, or the community or industry in any different way?
To me, like the way my perspective on comic books has changed is that it's a medium that I now approach with gratitude, like because of the way that we've talked about comics and embraced comics and really embracing the idea that every single comic has something to offer, like has really opened the world to me in a way where I'm like, I'm free to read anything. I can read anything I want, or I can read the thing that is exactly up my alley and is exactly me. It's all there. in terms of the community, like the comic book community is just like any community. Like you have to find your people. And the only way that you're going to find your people is to be utterly and unabashedly and unapologetically, though I do apologize a lot, yourself. You know, like, like if I continue to have the conversations about comics that I want to have and that Brad wants to have, we're going to find the people who want to have that same conversation. If I try to, you know, stress out and really study, you know, before, you know, so that I'm sure I have the mental capacity to become the IMDb of comics.
But even when you know all the characters, Lisa, you just have like a hang up.
Yeah.
Where like,
oh gosh.
Suddenly it's like, well, who are the Fantastic Four?
I can't even remember. I have like in baseball, I'm going to use a sports analogy, which is like way irresponsible because I'm not a sports person. But like this resonates with me. The idea of the yips. Like where like a baseball player misses one pitch and from then on they get scared every time they're up to bat. I have the yips with proper nouns. I hate saying a name. Like I just freeze every time I have to say a name of a place, a name of a writer. Like I just get scared.
You know, I was watching the TV show Poker Face, the new Ryan Johnson show.
Yeah.
And in the first episode, Charlie, the Natasha Lyonne character, keeps like freezing on the word locker.
Yeah.
Like she cannot remember the word locker. And that's like the first time I've seen in a show that kind of thing that you go through where like, you know, you can see the character in your head. You know, it's Mr. Fantastic. You know, he's married to Sue Storm, but you cannot remember that the name is Reed Richards. And then you do like Charlie in Poker Face just like fights her way to the answer.
Yeah.
You do that sometimes.
I do
which
that
is
sometimes.
adorable.
I have to fight my way to remembering. There's always like a wall. Well, where Brad is the classic nerd who does have that encyclopedic type memory and recall.
And I used to be a real asshole about it.
And he did, and I had to really train him out of it.
And then I realized, oh shit, am I being a gatekeeper?
Yeah, but I mean, even for this interview, like I have my like little like, you know, do a little Foley art. I have like just a sheet of proper nouns for the things that I love and talk about all of the time, just because I just need my security blanket.
Lisa, I feel you on that. It took me a long time to realize not everything in life is going to be a test that I need to study for. Sometimes you just be. Sometimes you gotta be in the moment.
Yeah.
And I thank you for saving the comic community from one less comic book guy and giving us the awesome Brad that I got to talk to today.
Yeah.
And Brad, this question's for you, and of course, Lisa, you could chime in too. If you could give an aspiring podcaster or a comic creator, considering the fact that you guys have interviewed and picked the brains of so many, if you could give an aspiring podcaster or comic creator one piece of advice based on your experience and interactions with people in the industry, what would that be?
A couple things immediately come to mind. The thing I always say is just do it. You know, the Nike slogan, just do it.
Just do it.
You know, it took a long time for Lisa and I to just do it. We spent a year talking about comic book couples counseling before we ever recorded one episode because we were waiting to be podcasters. I don't even understand why we took so long. We took a long time and then we just did it. And I would say that about everything. I would say that about, you know, oh, well, how do I get on press lists? Well, go to the internet. Go to those websites of those publishers. Go to Image Comics. Find the press contact. It's there. Send them an email. You go like, well, I haven't really done any reviews before. I haven't done any interviews before. Just do it. Submit the emails to those publicists. Reach out to people on Twitter or Instagram or Hive or wherever and say, hey, you want to do this thing with me? They'll say no. And you know what? That's fine. Or they'll say yes. And you'll be shocked. You'll be shocked at how many people will say yes, even if you have nothing to back it up. You know, Tom Scioli had no reason to say yes to us. We just asked him. And the other piece of advice is a piece of advice that I just got recently. And
From
I think
Bader? He gave us a lot of advice right before the show.
All that advice I've written down, and I'm going to use all that too.
Yes,
but I've recently started a public access show in Maryland for Prince George's County Television.
Oh, that's rad.
Something I never thought in a million years would happen. But my friend from In the Mouth of Darkness, Brian Young, he works for PGC TV, and he's like, let's do a Siskel and Ebert like show. And I said, okay. I said, just do it. You asked, I said, yes. It's the most vulnerable thing I've done in a long time. I'm often not happy with my performance on that. Like the moment you put a television camera on me, my brain leaves. And I just cannot be critical in any way, or at least not in a way that I'm happy with it. But my producer on that show, Gina, she said to me that TV isn't clean. And when she said TV isn't clean, what she was saying is, Brad, don't get hung up on all the stumble bumbles that you're doing, reading the teleprompter. TV isn't clean. Every newscast, every show, people are stumbling over their words. Just do it, So she told me just do it through the phrase TV isn't clean. I would say that podcasting isn't clean.
Yeah. Like, just to tag onto your just do it idea, just remember, just build a body of work. Like, your first idea for a podcast or for an essay series or for whatever is not going to be your best idea.
Yeah, it's going to
suck.
Yeah.
So,
bad.
like, the main thing that keeps... So this is... a quote from Ira Glass, but I go back to it all of the time, and I always misquote it. So here's a misquote from Ira Glass: "Is the main thing that's starting you from building a new skill or starting a new project is your own good taste." Because like when you're a kid and you're like, I'm gonna take piano lessons or I'm gonna be a painter, you don't care. You don't care that
you're not Van Gogh.
Yeah, that your paintings are shitty and that you're like, you can barely read. You don't care. But then as an adult, and you go, oh, I want to be a podcaster. I want to be
David Chen.
I want to be a comic book writer or whatever. You start making your first thing, and as you're making it because of your good taste that it is not good. And I think like just keeping it in your mind, the idea of like, well, I'm building a body of work and this is just the beginning. And
the great tragedy of podcasting is that for whatever reason, people always want to go back and try your first episode as their first episode. And you're like, please, people, stop listening to the Dark Phoenix Saga episode, please.
Yeah.
It's not our best.
No.
Start with Ninja Turtles.
Yeah.
No, Lisa, well said. And I love that you quoted one of, probably the most famous podcasts at Ira Glass. I was like, leave it up to a podcaster to quote another famous podcaster.
I'm a big appreciator of this medium. I listen to so many podcasts. I listen to all of the podcasts.
Good stuff. Well, I appreciate both of you providing that insight. And normally I end interview episodes here. I'll start wrapping up. But I thought I'd do things a little different and treat our listeners to some, some extra stuff, right? Like we took off last week. So I want to treat them well. And you two are well versed in comics and very in tune with what's going on in current comics. I think it would be great if you two would be great for our next segment. And before we call it a wrap, let's go ahead and grab a fistful of comics.
You can either have a mouthful of teeth or a fistful of comics.
Fistful of Comics. My Short Box Nation listeners know what time it is. Fistful of Comics is a segment dedicated to helping all you comic-curious newbies and regular Wednesday warriors find the best new titles worthy of your time and attention the next time you step foot in a comic shop. Let me go here. Okay, all right. And of course, we're lucky enough to have today's comic picks provided to us by Ben Kingsbury. He's the owner of Gotham City Limit, Jacksonville's premier comic shop, and the most excited man you'll ever meet when it comes to helping people take their comic shopping experience to the limit. This guy loves selling and talking about comic books, so it's only right that we get Ben involved. Let's get some music going and see what's on the horizon for comic lovers in the next month or two. All right. Okay. So his list starts out strong. We can't talk about great comics you should be reading and not talk about the Big Blue Boy Scout. Take it away, Ben.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, Short Box listeners. I'm Ben K, representing Gotham City Limit, and these are my final order cutoffs you should add to your pull comic list immediately. First up, DC Comics Superman Lost #1, a 10-part series. Time flies when you're having fun. However, does time fly when you aren't? The hardest part of telling a great Superman story is dealing with his overwhelmingly immense power set. Leave it to Christopher Priest to find a way to make the Man of Steel from an alien species ultimately the most human among us. Bonus nugget, if you've never read Christopher Priest's Eisner-nominated Deathstroke series, go ahead and pick up a copy of that. Now that's taking it to the limit.
All right, folks. Look, this is, as you can tell, Ben is very excited to give some recommendations this week. So excited that he went above and beyond with the homework. He's giving bonus recommendations on top of the recommendations he already provided. Once again, that was Superman Lost #1. It's written by Christopher Priest with art by Carlo Pagolin. Probably said that wrong. My apologies, but it comes out March 1st. Okay, I'm going to take a pause right here, break fourth wall. So that's basically what we're going to do for 2 more voicemails. And I completely forgot to mention that I added a link to his 3 comic picks in the chat. So if you just go to chat, yeah, I'm sorry, I should have mentioned that. But there's a hyperlink for each one if you want to take a look at it while I play these.
I lost
all right, there we go. All right, let me move on to a second one. Okay, comic number 2. All right. All right, and then comic pick number 2 comes from Dynamite Comics. And spoiler warning, it speaks to anyone that's recently enjoyed the recent King Kong movies like I have. Ben, tell us all about it.
Next up, Dynamite Comics presents Kong, Great War #1. World War II. Imagine being lost at sea in the Pacific, facing terror beyond your imagination, monsters from creation's dawn, gruesome, blood-stained death from above and below. You faced death before, but now you must contend with the ape god that knows no master, Kong. Bonus nugget number 2. This reminds me of a great story by Avatar Press, Uber, an Elseworlds World War II story that will quite literally take it to your imagination limit.
Look, Ben lives to take people to the limit, and that's what he's doing this week, folks. Once again, that was Kong, the Great War #1. It's written by Alex Cox with art by Tomasa Bianchi. Probably said that one wrong, too. That one also comes... that one is also hitting comic shops March 1st. And last but not least, wrapping up this list just as strong as we started, here's another DC book for you to keep an eye on.
And finally, DC Comics presents Waller vs. Wildstorm, #1 of a 4-part series. Put yourself in the early 80s. Have you ever heard of an ambitious young woman named Amanda Waller? Well, I bet you have. However, as you know, she has her own ideas about how metahumans can serve their country. And apparently honor and dignity don't factor into that. Celebrate Wildstorm's legacy of espionage against the deadliest people in the DCU, including Deathstroke himself. Bonus nugget number 3, speaking of the early 80s, my favorite comic book cover of all time is Amazing Spider-Man 238, the first appearance of Hobgoblin. And Gotham City Limit has homaged it for the 3rd time. X-23 Deadly Regenesis #1, coming out March 8th, presented by Tyler Kirkham, a Gotham City Limit exclusive. Make sure you get yourself on the pre-order for that. Well, another week is come and gone. I'm still Ben K, representing Gotham City Limit in Jacksonville, Florida. Remember, with great power comes great responsibility, and always take it to the limit.
There we go, folks. That was a strong list, and I love the shameless plug. You know, anytime Ben's got a variant, Gotham City Limit variant exclusive, he's going to let you know, and we're all here for it, right? Brad and Lisa, of the 3 options that Ben just shared, which one would you say is most worthy of possibly making it on your pull list?
May I say something about Ben first? What I like about him is that he takes it to the limit, but he doesn't go over the limit, which means he respects boundaries, which is very important in a relationship.
That is possibly the best. I couldn't even expect a better answer coming from you, Lisa. That was excellent. You're right. Ben knows exactly where the limit is, and that's where he's taking you. No further, no less.
Yeah, I'm not here to be challenged.
I bet that the Waller versus Wildstorm series would have a lot of relationship stuff to mine. That would be my guess of those 3 titles. that one seems the most ready for comic book couples counseling.
But I want to take that one. Do we have to come up with separate ones? Because if we're
No,
coming
no,
up
no.
with separate ones, can we agree? Maybe we
Yes,
agree.
we can all agree.
Yeah, the Amanda Waller versus Wildstorm one sounds good to me. I love espionage. I love plots and schemes. I love a non-superpowered individual in a superpowered world. I think that's an interesting perspective.
But if I was going to be honest about which one of the three I'm most excited about, it's Superman Lost. I love Christopher Priest. I think he's a fantastic writer. I'm excited to see him take on Superman. We're in a very Superman headspace right now, even though we haven't covered Lois and Clark on the podcast. We did recently chat with Joshua Williamson and Jamal Campbell about their Superman #1. We've had a chance to read that issue. If you want to put something in your pull box that is great and that is Superman related, if you're picking up Superman Lost, make sure you've got Superman #1 from Williamson and Jamal Campbell on there, because it is a great Superman first issue. An awesome place for people to jump on. People are excited about all the DCU news. They want to get back on board with Superman. I think both of these books are a good place to start.
Yeah.
Awesome. Listeners, you're getting a bunch of bonus recommendations today, all right? Free of charge at that. I will go ahead and chime in and make this a unanimous decision. I am very excited for Waller versus Wildstorm. I was excited for it when it was first announced, but it was recently pushed out due to I think scheduling and all that. A few reasons why I'm excited for this. One, it's a Black Label book, and I have gone on record saying I think these Black Label books have been some of the best things coming out of DC. I think there's something about the creative freedom that is being allowed to these writers and artists, and it doesn't hurt that Marie Javins, right? Marie Javins is the editor-in-chief. The other exciting thing about this is that the writers are two names I'm not familiar with. You got Spencer Ackerman, who is a national security reporter, and he's written books about like espionage and like Reign of Terror. And then you've also got video game writer Evan Narcissi, I believe. But he's written on Spider-Man Miles Morales, the new Gotham Knights game. So a good mix of like someone that knows like real deal espionage and national security stuff, and a video game writer, someone that's written like Miles Morales is a great game, great story. And of course, Eric Battle is doing the artwork. So I'm looking forward to this. And I think, we rarely get all three of us agreeing on, we rarely get 3 consecutive votes on one comic book. So listeners,
though
look.
technically, I think Brad, you chose
he did
Superman.
dip his toe on Superman.
Yeah.
I'm also
Right.
excited about anything that's Kong related. So.
Let's be honest, all 3 are going to be in our pull box
They're strong.
because we don't
They're
have
strong.
restraint. That's not how we operate.
You're on the right place then, Lisa. All right, folks. Well, that's our segment, everyone. If any of those titles grabbed your attention, go hit up your local comic shop and get your pre-orders in now. A big shout out to Ben for the help this week. And remember, even if you don't live in Jax, you can still take it to the limit by shopping at GothamCityLimit.com for comics and exclusive variants like the one that Ben just mentioned. They're doing a exclusive Tyler Kirkham variant of X-23 Deadly Genesis #1. It's going to be that Hobgoblin homage cover. You can go ahead and pre-order that by going to their websites. There'll be a link in the bio. With that being said, though, that also marks the end of the show. Lisa, Brad, I want to thank you so much for being a part of the show. It was a fantastic conversation. I'm probably going to have a really deep talk, really deep look in the mirror today and really find out, what motivates me and keeps me going. So I'm so glad I was able to finally meet you two and have you guys on. I'll have links to your podcast and socials in the show notes so everyone listening can find you guys, which I highly recommend you do so. Give them a subscribe. But would you care to leave us with any parting words or tell us what's next for the podcast? What other couples will you guys be exploring next?
Ooh, we're really excited for what's coming next.
Yeah, so we've already teased the Invincible episodes with Robert Kirkman. We just finished up the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles series. But our next week's episode, is another conversation that we never thought we were going to have, and is kind of like a weird way of... What's the word I'm looking for? It's not cyclical, but like it's going back to what started everything.
Yeah.
Do you want to say it?
We got Dan Slott. to talk
Oh,
Norrin
wow.
Rad and Don Greenwood with us, and he was super
That's
generous.
awesome.
The interview is already in the can, so as long as the cloud doesn't explode, that will be. I'm a worry wart.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we
let's
have
hope
lots of
not.
copies, Lisa. Don't
I
worry.
don't feel safe until the episode is out,
But it is a in-depth conversation with Dan Slott
full spoilers, so you're going to want to read the comics.
about Silver Surfer. So it is Silver Surfer focused. We sadly don't get to talk about Superior Spider-Man. We don't get to talk about She-Hulk, things that we love. This is a Silver Surfer obsessed episode, and we're biased, but it's one of the best conversations we've done on the podcast.
It's so fun.
Hell yeah.
It's like a second opinion on the relationship analysis we did back episodes 50 through 53, but this is from the man himself, or one of the men. We still need to get Mike Allred
and Laura Allred.
But,
Yeah.
but
yeah.
I think he has
They're
a
great.
valuable perspective on the story.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And from what I know of what I've seen of Dan Slott interviews, he seems like someone that's just happy doing what he does.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to hear his thoughts and hearing your excitement. I mean, you guys just talked about how much that Silver Surfer or Norrin Rad and Dawn meant to you guys. So I'm excited to hear that myself.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Awesome. Well, Lisa and Brad, thank you guys so much. Don't be a stranger. I'd love to have you guys back on.
Oh, we're going to be
and to our
inviting
listeners.
ourselves back.
Yeah, get ready, Bonner.
Yeah.
We're not even going to let these chairs get cold.
Yeah, there's keys underneath the mat. You guys know where it's at. Awesome.